So avoiding gluten during the holidays. This is one of those times of the year. If you are traveling, we talked a little bit about Friday about how to deal with the travel, and I'm kind of just going to recap some of it. Many of you are traveling to go visit with family, especially over the Thanksgiving holiday, but many of you are also maybe traveling during the Christmas holidays. And so what's going to happen is you're going to end up eating what I call OPF, other people's food, right? And that you just don't know when you're eating other people's food. You don't know what it was made out of. You don't know what kind of kitchen surface. You don't know what kind of care or what kind of meticulous nature the cook was or had. Now, maybe if it's direct family like your mom that you're going to visit or a direct relative that you're going to visit, maybe they do take direct care. Maybe they're following the no grain, no pain diet protocols with you. And so maybe they do have it dialed in. In those cases, look, you can probably feel a little bit better about that trip. However, many of you, I see this time and time again with patients in my clinic, is that they go off on the holidays and they visit. And what they did is they didn't prepare. They didn't take food with them. They didn't plan ahead. And what ended up happening is they ended up getting exposure, not necessarily even exposure on purpose, but they got cross-contamination or unintentional exposure. And they end up getting very, very sick. Especially, there are many of you that may have ultra gluten sensitivity, meaning even just a small, tiny amount will make you extremely sick, give you diarrhea, give you vomiting, give you severe pain, give you severe neurological symptoms or brain fog, or even neuropathy. I've seen all of these different types of scenarios just depending on the person. So some of you are very, very ultra sensitive. And so look, sometimes that means taking your own cooler. But what I recommend that you do even before that is schedule a phone call up your relatives, whoever they are. If you're not quite sure, if you're not real comfortable with what their capacity about a grain-free, gluten-free diet is, and you really feel like you need to have this conversation, please do, because otherwise you'll show up and they'll have slaved over a bunch of food for you. And maybe they'll have used corn or rice or some of the other, gluten-free product type items that are out there that you just don't tolerate, that make you sick, but they thought they were making you a gluten-free meal. So have the conversation before you show up. Don't show up and say, sorry, I can't eat your food. I'm a food snob. Not that you'll do that, but that's the way they'll perceive it. And a lot of it is in the perception. So if you call them up, the way I like this conversation to go very simply is, look, whoever the relative is, I know you love me and I know you want what's best for me. Right now, I'm really struggling with my diet and my health. And in order to stay healthy, I really have to be very meticulous about what I eat. So I'm coming, but I'm going to bring some of my own food, and I don't want you to take offense. And I certainly don't want you to do more work in the kitchen than what's necessary just for me. It's not fair to you for me to expect that of you. So if you don't mind, don't take offense when I show up and when I come. I'm going to have my own food, and that's done by design on purpose, just so that I can stay healthy. Thank you so much in advance for understanding. I really, really love you, and I appreciate that. So have a conversation, something along those lines. And look, if they're a reasonable person, a reasonable family member, they're not going to give you flack. And if they do, you've got a different kind of a problem. If you've got somebody who's giving you that much flack for trying to just maintain your health and be healthy, then you've got a different kind of animal beast kind of problem altogether. But I encourage you to have that song now, or that conversation. Now, one of the other things that you will want to do, and one of the things I encourage you to do is, look, if you're driving, it's different if you're flying on an airplane, but if you're driving, it's very, very easy to pack an ice cooler. And there are very simple things that you can pack, knowing what you can and can't eat. Of course, that's on you, not on somebody else. So packing things in a cooler that you can carry with you. Also packing things that are non-perishable, or at least have a longer shelf life, that you can gravitate toward, that don't require a lot of cooking or preparation time. To me, what that might look like is a can of sardines or salmon or tuna. It might look like some grass-fed beef jerky or free-range organic turkey jerky. It might look like different types of nuts. So, almonds, pistachios, walnuts, hazelnuts, Brazil nuts, any of those types of things. They don't go bad. They stay, or they do go bad, but they don't go bad quickly, and they stay fresh, and you can eat them on the road. And you can make the event and the holiday and the trip less about, celebratory food slaughter, which is what I oftentimes refer to holidays as people get together to kill themselves with food. Or you can make it more about visiting. You can make it more about the event, about visiting the people that you're communicating to, the people that you're going so far to see. So if you're traveling on an airplane, you can take those less perishable items that are canned. And if you're traveling, locally, driving several hours and you have the space, you want to pack a cooler, it's just a lot easier to do it that way. Highly recommend that you plan ahead, though, because if you're not planning ahead, you're going to get into trouble, and you're probably most likely going to get some degree of cross-contamination as a result of it. So make sure you're planning ahead. Make sure that you are carrying food with you. The classic, I like to call it the food suitcase, is another option. And make sure you just stay out of trouble. I can remember a number of times where I've been in a bind where I was traveling and without pre-planning, I would have probably just not eaten. I probably would have just not eaten. We went one year it was a restaurant, and I just don't like to eat restaurant food. So I just ate before we went, and I just enjoyed a cup of water at the restaurant, and that left it at that. So again, you don't have to make the event about the food, and I highly encourage you to get more into that mentality if you want to be successful at being healthy. We live in a world where the food trust has been completely broken. People that produce food have broken our trust. The people that service the food industry and the people that serve food in the food industry, really all of them have taken what they're calling food and they're serving up chemicals that are loaded with pesticides, that are loaded with other garbage, and they're calling that food, and it's socially acceptable. So everybody is pressuring, from a social perspective, everybody's pressuring everyone else to say that it's okay to eat garbage, when in fact, look around. We have more heart disease, more cancer, more diabetes, more autoimmune disease, more people with Alzheimer's disease and bone loss. Look, the average person in the United States is either going to die from cancer, autoimmune disease, or heart disease. And that's the reality. And a big part of that reality has to do with what we put in our mouths. It has to do with what we're putting in our body. So again, if you're trying to avoid gluten during the holidays, plan ahead. It's the number one thing that you can do to stay out of trouble. I talked about a number of different supplements last time and supplement strategies, so I'm not going to belabor those. But now I'm going to open the floor for a few questions because we've got a bunch of them coming in. Okay. It looks like a lot of you are bringing your own food already, and I love that. I love that you're already there. You're already there in your minds. You're already psychologically there doing that. Okay, Jennifer Weaver's asking, are you giving recipes? I can. Let's talk a little bit about that. And so here's what I want everybody to do. If you have your favorite holiday grain-free, and it's important that it needs to be grain-free, don't post it up on the feed unless it is, because the vast majority of the people that are following the no grain, no pain protocol, look, we want to adhere to those general rules, which is no sugar, no grain, no dairy. Those are the three predominant rules. So beyond that, we do allergy testing, and we test to see what people are reactive to or not reactive to. So if you've got your favorite recipe that you want to share handy, I want you to post it into the feed, whether that's posting a link to another website where the recipe is listed, or whether it's just typing it into the feed. Let's see what you've got. Now, let's talk about some substitution ideas. One of the things that a lot of people are going to do over the course of the next week is pumpkin pie, right? Pumpkin pie is kind of this mega tradition, and I love pumpkin pie, but you've got to do it. There are a couple of ways that you can do it without the grain. The traditional crust is a wheat-based crust. So what we like to do is we like to crush nut, particularly pecan. Crushed pecan makes a really, really good crust. You can also make your crusts out of a combination of arrowroot and tapioca. That actually makes a pretty good crust as well. So if you like the crust, if you have to have the crust, you've got crust options. You have to use those as substitutes. Now, what I will be posting up, let me just plug this in. I did a blog a number of months ago on what you could grab in terms of, here we go, grain-free flours. So this is a list, a pretty comprehensive list of grain-free flours that you can use. I'm putting that up in the comments block, so you should have that. It should be a link. If it's not a link, you can copy and paste that URL and go to it. But that's a list of different flour recipes, or not recipes, but different flour substitute flours that can be used in lieu of wheat, barley, rye, oats, corn, or rice flour. So It's a pretty lengthy list, and some of those flours have different properties, different textures, different tastes, depending on what you're trying to do. But for pumpkin pie, you can make a really good crust using arrowroot and tapioca. You can make a really good crust using pecan. I've had them both ways. They're both good. Now, another way is to just not have a crust. The thing about pumpkin pie is it sets up nicely and you don't even really need a crust. But the issue with the pie then becomes how much sugar are you going to pump into that pie? I don't recommend putting sugar in. Now, you can sweeten with stevia, but there is another product, and if Alan is listening, he'll post this up for us, and I'll post a link up to it. There's a sweetening agent that can be used. It's called TheraSweet, and it works really, really great for baking. If you can use it as a 1-to-1 ratio for sugar, but it's basically it's amino acids and sugar alcohol, so you're not getting that heavy sugar quantity from it, and that works really, really well. So for pumpkin pies, you can sweeten that way. I've known some people to sweeten a pumpkin pie, and it's a little different tasting. It's not going to taste maybe exactly the way you think of a pumpkin pie to taste, but using maple or using honey. Now, honey's super, super sweet, so if you're a sweet junkie, honey might fit that pretty well. So again, I don't recommend honey just from a personal taste perspective, but taste is relative. So, but TheraSweet works really, really well, and maple can work pretty decently well. Xylitol, which is a birchwood based sweetener, can also work really well. And if your stomach tolerates stevia and you do well with stevia, you can use stevia as the sweetener. So that takes care of the pumpkin pie. What about these? So we've got a lot of people want to do. I think I posted this one up last week. It was a recipe for a gluten-free stuffing, and here it is. I'm going to repost that for you today because this stuffing recipe is very, very good, actually. So if you like the traditional stuffing and you're looking for an alternative that you can use, this recipe is a grain-free stuffing recipe that works really, really well. Let's see here. Okay, that's going up into the feed now, so that's coming up. So if you're looking for a stuffing, there you have it. There's a stuffing recipe. We talked about pumpkin pie. A lot of people too want to do mashed potatoes, and many of you, if you're following No Grain No Pain, it's a potato-free diet as well, white potato-free diet, because of the nightshade component that can contribute to joint pain, which is really quite common. So if you're looking for a mashed potato substitute, one of the things that you can use, and it works extremely well, and it actually has quite a good flavor, is specifically a Japanese sweet potato. Now, these are different than your traditional orange sweet potatoes in this sense. Those traditional orange, kind of the brownish skin, you open it up, the flesh is really, really orange, and in some cases can be a little stringy. And a lot of people don't like that, although you can make a sweet potato pie and it does sweeten itself. But a Japanese sweet potato is a little bit more yellow, and the texture and consistency of this type of potato is a lot more like a white potato, but it doesn't tend to cause the aggravation that we'll see in a white potato. So you got to keep that in mind. The Japanese sweet potato, it's got a purple skin on the outside with a kind of a yellowish flesh. And you can bake them just the same. We like to bake them and then mash them as well, and it makes a great mashed potato. And if you like gravy, here's another tidbit on meal fixing is we use tapioca and arrowroot flours to make our gravy. So you can take basically the broth from the turkey runoff, and some people do hams. You can take the broth from the ham, or you can take the broth from the turkey runoff, and you can mix that, and you can just thicken it lightly with a little arrowroot or a little tapioca. It makes a fantastic gravy. As a matter of fact, arrowroot does a little bit better of job because it doesn't quite gum up or gel up the way tapioca can make it almost like gel up, especially if you put in too much. So the key is add a little slowly and stir as it's boiling, and let it thicken on the stove, and you'll have a super, super tasty gravy. And again, if you use the chicken, or not the chicken, but the turkey broth from the turkey itself, or the ham broth from the ham itself, it'll taste even better. And you just take that gravy and you just throw it over those sweet potatoes, that mashed sweet potato, and it makes for a fantastic mashed potatoes with gravy. And of course, you can use that gravy on any of the food that you're eating, but it's very, very good in terms of the way that they taste. And again, the Japanese sweet potato, fantastic. Now, you may have a whole household coming and you like not wanting to experiment with a brand new recipe. So if you haven't tried this, look, you have time. That's why I want to do this live today and talk about this today, because you still have time. What you can do is go buy one of those Japanese sweet potatoes, bake it at about 450 degrees for about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, depending on the size, because they're not uniform in shape. Some of them are really fat. Some of them are kind of long. The thinner, longer ones don't quite take as long in the oven to bake because that heat penetrates a little bit better. But bake them and cut that skin off and try eating some of it. And if you like the way it tastes and your family likes the way it tastes, go to town with it. Create it for your Thanksgiving. But if you've never done it before, again, you might not want to attempt to do a big dish where you're buying, a couple of pounds of these sweet potatoes and then nobody likes it. And I've not yet run into people that haven't liked it, but again, taste is relative. So I'm just, word of caution. When we make Thanksgiving dinner at my house, everything is following that no grain, no pain protocol. And doesn't matter who's visiting us or who's eating the food. We've never had anybody turn their nose up at the food, because you can make delicious, fabulous food. It just takes a little bit of experience and a little bit of elbow grease and know-how. And if you're the type, my wife's the type of person that she just dives right in, and she, even if she tries a recipe that she doesn't like, she's going to make it and she's going to alter that recipe or modify that recipe to get it right. And so you might have a little of experimenting to do with some of these recipes, but highly, highly worth doing. Okay, let's see here. So that was a great question. That sparked a lot of conversation. Let's see what else we got. So, okay, so just some audience chime in. Elizabeth saying, I bake Japanese sweet potato, very yummy. So there's one in favor of the Japanese sweet potato. So again, as taste is relative, so too you might want to check it out again before you commit. Let's see here. Mary from Lake Michigan, UP of Michigan. I don't know what UP stands for, but Lake Linden, way up north. So I guess I bet it's cold up there. I've been to Lake Michigan, but not in the winter. Joy from Buffalo, New York. Welcome, Joy. Sylvia's chiming in. Just saw those this weekend. She's referring to Japanese sweet potatoes. Yeah, again, they're you can check them out. They're quite delicious. Here's another chime on that. Matthew's saying, spent 6 years in Japan. Those potatoes are delicious. So again, we haven't had anybody chime in saying they didn't like them. So it's a crowd favorite. And it's kind of one of those secret things. Unless you've heard about it or somebody's told you about it, you wouldn't even know to try it, because a lot of people are scared to try those weird oblong-shaped potatoes when you see them in the grocery store. Marie is chiming in. Against All Grains by Danielle Walker has amazing recipes for gluten grain-free. Happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, absolutely. I can vouch for that as well. It's a great cookbook for grain-free cooking. Danielle Walker's done a fantastic job of putting together a number of recipes that can be used and that are grain-free that actually taste good. Okay. Okay, another good one. I like this one from Maria. Cauliflower mash is yummy too. So what you can do with cauliflower is there's a couple different ways. I've actually seen it now where you can buy it organically frozen in the store where it's already ground up. So that makes it a lot easier if you don't have a food processor to prep foods at home. Or you can buy the whole head of cauliflower, and you can quarter that head and you can put it in a food processor and blend it up really, really well. And then you can create a mash out of it, and so you can steam it, or you can cook it on the stovetop. What we like to do is we like to add the broth. So pouring in either the chicken or the turkey broth. Again, you can use the broth from your turkey if you have some left over after you make the gravy, and it makes a really, really nicely flavored cauliflower mash as an alternative to mashed potatoes, but quite good. All right. Matthew from Fort Wayne, Indiana, checking in. Hi, Matthew. Thanks for joining us tonight. Okay, here's another. I like this one because a lot of you will do well with it. But Jennifer's saying that I don't know who Max is, but maybe that's one of her family members made mac and cheese with cashews. Depending on what you're going to use your noodle with, but cashew can make a very cheesy-like. It can have a very cheesy-like consistency. Some people actually make cheesecakes with cashew or other cheese-like items with cashew. I've seen people with cashew cheese. So that it can definitely be a substitute for cheese for those of you who are following, again, that no grain, no pain protocol where you're not getting the dairy in. All right, let's see here. Looks like we've had a couple of people chiming in about this one, potato and joints, meaning that some of you have said you weren't aware of potatoes as being a potential problem. Potatoes can be a very, very big problem for a couple of different reasons. One of the reasons we'll see potatoes be a problem is the high sugar level, and some people don't process that broken down glucose very well, and so it can actually trigger systemic inflammation. But another component of the potato is it's a part of the nightshade family, and there's a special type of compound in them called solenoid, which is can be very, very inflammatory for people with autoimmune arthritis like lupus or scleroderma or rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis or spondyloarthritis or reactive arthritis or migratory arthritis. So again, potato can be a major, major trigger. If you didn't know that, again, going back to that sweet potato as something that you want to check in and try. Here's another question. I don't know that it's so much related to Thanksgiving, but let's talk about it. Is it safe to take medicinal mushrooms where other ingredients list myceliated brown rice? Well, no, I wouldn't use it if it has brown rice in it. Just not what I would recommend. Would benefits outweigh the risk regarding taking either medicinal mushrooms or colostrum to support immune system to help heal a leaky gut? Okay, this is a good question. I talked a little bit about this last Friday, but I'm going to talk about it again today. If you see brown rice on the ingredient, then the risk does not outweigh the benefit, because there's always a way to get medicinal mushroom even without the brown rice. So let's not trade tit for tat. Let's not do damage to try to reverse damage. You'll end up in this. And you ever seen one of those cats or dogs chasing their tail indefinitely, and they never win that war, right? Until they get dizzy and fall over, right? It's a battle you're not going to win. If you're putting gluten in and in hopes that you'll feel better by using the supplement that has other ingredients that could be helpful, you're doing damage to take damage away. And that's a sum loss game. You're not going to win that battle. So you got to find a different source of medicinal mushroom that doesn't have the brown rice. Now, as far as colostrum, a lot of you take colostrum to support immune health, and colostrum is derived from dairy. And, those of you who are ultra sensitive to dairy can't tolerate the colostrum or don't do well with it. Now, I talked about, and I still have it right here because I talked about it on Friday. I talked about a non-colostrum form, and that's this. So if I move this, let me just move this out of the way here. Where did you go? Here we go. Okay, so I talked about Ultramune IgG last week, and I told you there were a couple different varieties, and one of them was a colostrum-based, but two others are not a colostrum-based. There are Ultramune IgG formulations that are serum-derived, meaning they are not from dairy, and so that makes them very, very much more safer and much more effective for those people that have dairy sensitivities. So if you're looking for something along those lines, again, to support your immune function, and you're super reactive to the colostrum and don't want to use the dairy, then you've got to go with something that doesn't create that problem for you. And then the last part of that question was, would Gluten Shield before taking them negate? No, I mean, look, so I talked about Gluten Shield last week, which is my formula for, breaking down gluten and reducing your risk of damage from gluten cross-contamination. But I think it's very important that you understand as well that Gluten Shield supplement is not, taking it is not an excuse to get gluten. In other words, you don't take it because you're going to eat gluten. You take it in case you might accidentally get exposed. It's not designed so that you can cheat or sneak gluten into your diet. It's designed to protect you from cross-contamination or unknown sources of hidden gluten if you're eating out or traveling or eating OPF, other people's food. So again, don't purposefully ingest it, because look, this is the size of a breadcrumb, right? That's how much gluten, and studies have been shown to cause an inflammatory response for as long as 2 months. So you don't want to just say, oh, I'm just going to take Dr. Osborne's Gluten Shield, and then from now on, I'm going to eat some gluten or be exposed to some gluten, and it'll be okay because I'm protecting myself. That's not what it was designed to do. It was designed to protect you while you're going through the learning curve of gluten-free diet and the grain-free diet, while you're learning, because you're going to make mistakes and you're going to potentially eat out and you're going to potentially travel. So you want a layer of protection where you can have it, but it isn't, again, it's not an excuse to just do something beyond what you should be doing. So Andrea is asking, any ideas of what to do to help when you do get contaminated? Look, one of my favorite things to do is a vitamin C flush. Okay, let's talk about the two different types of people. First off, I think it's important to say there is, when people get exposure to gluten, we have the constipation type, okay? And so this protocol that I'm about to talk to you, this nutritional support protocol, is for the constipation type. It's okay, so when you get exposure to gluten, if you tend to ride the line of constipation and not the line of loose bowels and diarrhea, if you're the constipation type and you get gluten exposure or what you suspect might be gluten exposure, one of the best things you can do is flush out your bowels. Okay, flush out your bowels. Otherwise, it's just going to sit in there and it's just going to continue to wreak its damage on your GI tract and on your lining. And we want to try to get it out as quickly as possible. So how are we going to do that? A couple of different strategies. Number one is the vitamin C flush. It's a very, very safe strategy. It's where you're taking vitamin C. And again, I have the link online for this. If one of my team, maybe hopefully they'll get it posted up as I'm talking, where it's the actual flush protocol instruction. And we'll post that up to the notes after the show as well, so that you guys listening can have it. But I'm going to verbalize it to you. Basically, it's taking 6 grams of vitamin C every 15 minutes, mixed in 3 ounces of water until you flush out your bowel. And that's exactly what it'll do. It'll create a diarrhea. It'll create a flush. And what will happen is it'll flush out the contents of your intestine. And that's exactly what we want to try to do if you're a constipation type when you get gluten exposure. We want that gluten out of you as quickly as possible. We don't want it sitting in there creating and replicating and creating more and more and more inflammation. So we're going to try to flush it out of you. Vitamin C is one of the best ways to do that. Now, you want to chase that down too with some Gluten Shield, meaning you want to get the enzyme in you. And it's, again, if you're ever in a scenario where you think you might be getting exposure or have the potential to get exposure, look, preemptively take it. Don't wait until you get the exposure. Just preemptively take it and give yourself that extra layer of protection. Okay. So that's for the constipation type. What if you have more of a loose bowel? What if the issue is more of a loose bowel? So let's talk about that. So if your exposure is one that really creates loose bowels, then this is the strategy that you want to follow. With loose bowels, what generally happens is your body's trying to dump it for you. Your body is just trying to push it out. Because it's irritating your lining, your gut will respond and go through peristaltic reaction and try to push it out of you through a looser bowel. Now, one of the things that you want to know happens on the flip side of this, in essence, our recovery from this is better supported with a heavy dose probiotic. And this goes also for the constipation type, but again, for the loose bowel type, sometimes what happens is the loose bowels are triggered. And depending on the type of person, especially, I see this especially in people with with inflammatory bowel disease histories like celiac disease, Crohn's, and ulcerative colitis is we'll see the loose bowel start even with a little bit of exposure to gluten or grain, and they won't stop, even though there may not be an ongoing exposure. So to stabilize the bowel movement, to kind of normalize that, a high-dose probiotic can work really, really well. You've got to get upwards of 200 plus billion colony-forming units, and in many cases, a half a billion, or not a half a billion, 500 billion colony-forming units of heavy doses of bifido and lactobacillus can be extremely effective at that recovery. And then you can combine that again with what I talked about earlier, which is ultra-immune IgG. Ultra-immune IgG also helps to support the immune system in the bowel. It helps to minimize that long-term exposure possibility for damage. So those are two kind of different strategies, but again, it just depends on what your response and what your reaction to it might be. So hopefully that's helpful for you in terms of what to do if you do get that exposure. Okay. Let's see here. Linda from Louisville, Kentucky is chiming in. Welcome, Linda. So Cassie is asking, what foods to avoid if you have ulcerative colitis and psoriasis? So you've got a double whammy of autoimmunity, and the foods you want to avoid are the food lists in chapter 7 and 8 of No Grain, No Pain. Again, if you have not read No Grain, No Pain, you need to go read No Grain, No Pain or listen to it. It's available on Audible. It's available in most major bookstores, and it's available on Amazon. But chapter 7 and 8 defines the food restrictions in an organized way, because it's more than just avoiding wheat, barley, and rye, and it's more than just avoiding grain, and it's more than just avoiding grain, dairy, and sugar. There's a list of other kind of trigger foods that we know that will contribute to autoimmune disease or delay the healing process. So again, Cassie, get really, really familiar with chapter 7 and 8 in the book, and that will be very helpful for both of those situations. Okay. So we getting more feedback on the Japanese potato. So again, tonight we're just promoting Japanese sweet potato for all of you looking for that potato substitute. Aggie is saying, I'm from Japan, and it's a very big part of our lives, and they are very good. So another prop to the Japanese sweet potato. Let's see here. I like this. So Jennifer's chiming in. I just made shepherd's pie with cauliflower mash. My friend had no clue it wasn't potato. Yeah, some people won't. I mean, some people won't recognize the flavor differential, and some people will. You can also make shepherd's pie with sweet potato, the Japanese sweet potato. It does a really good job also. Thanks for sharing that, Jennifer. Okay, Fian Young is asking, where can she find cashews that don't have peanut oil? Check out nutsonline.com. Nutsonline.com, they generally just have nuts, and that's it, just nuts. And so there's no extra ingredients, there's no preservative oils or anything else put on them. And then somebody else is chiming in, just buy the raw ones. So I agree with that. Just buy the raw ones and soak them. Okay. So some of you are saying potatoes are so high in carbs. Now, again, understand where my recommendations are coming from. I had somebody get upset at me and say, hey, I recommend too many carbs. It's not an issue of filling your plate with that mound of mashed potatoes and saying we're going to eat this mound of mashed potatoes. It's an issue of portion control. Look, we if we're looking for dynamic control, you look at all these different diets. There's keto diets, there's high protein diets, there's high carb diets, there's low fat diets. There's all these different, I'll call them extreme, and in some cases they are, and in some cases they're not, depending on the person, because everybody's unique and different. But the reality is most people do best on a nice ratio of carbs, fats, and proteins, meaning an equal third of caloric value coming from carbs, an equal third coming from protein, an equal third coming from fat. In essence, not over consuming carbohydrates in a massive way, which the average American diet is a 60-30-10, meaning 60% of the diet is carbs, 30% is protein, 10% is fat. where we want a more of a 30-30-30, somewhere in that equal thirds range. I call it the rule of thirds, because most of what we see in life has been about balance. If you look around in nature, there's balance everywhere we look. And I look at that carbohydrate, fat, and protein ratio as being something we need to start with the rule of thirds and then adjust it to the person. Some people have underlying situations or underlying conditions like SIBO, where they don't need to be on a third of their calories coming from carbohydrates because it feeds the SIBO. Or some people have a yeast overgrowth and it feeds the yeast. So first they have to contend with the SIBO or contend with the yeast or contend with another issue before they can really third out their diet and those ratios. And maybe initially they have to go a lot higher protein and a lot higher fat because they just can't tolerate the extra carbs. So again, it can get down to being very, very unique for the person. So I don't want you to think of any of this advice as a free for all to just carb out, right, and just overdo it. You've got to keep reason and common sense in there as well. Just because it's a holiday it doesn't give yourself permission to destroy your health with food. And remember, you can overeat as well. So like there's eating the wrong food that isn't good for you. Because remember the 3 cardinal rules of nutrition. Rule number 1, you can't get healthy eating food that's not healthy. And if you're sick, and you're trying to get healthy, if you go and deviate on your diet, you're not going to get healthy eating unhealthy food. That's kind of the no-brainer rule, right? Then you have rule number 2, which is don't eat what you're allergic or intolerant to. Well, if you don't know the answer to that, that's where testing can be extremely valuable in helping to discern what it is you should or shouldn't eat, because elimination diets can only get most people so far before they hit a plateau in trying to get better. And then the third rule is, look, if your body rejects it, or if your body is trying to tell you to stop eating it through symptoms, then you have to honor the wisdom of the body. And so that third rule, it doesn't matter if you've had an allergy test and you weren't allergic to it. If every time you eat it you feel horrible, you've got to listen to your body. Your body is smarter than all of us, and it's going to give you feedback if you open your mind to listening to that feedback. So it's very, very important that you listen to your body feedback following those 3 rules. That being said, again, eating on the holidays, one of the worst things that you can do, and one of the most fundamental ways to wreck your health, is to overeat. Is to put so much on your gut, is to put too much in your gut that you overload it, especially if you're battling with chronic illness. Now, some of you who are listening may be completely healthy, and having eating till you're really, really full may not affect your health in such a tremendous way. But there are those of you who are overcoming health issues and struggling. And one of the worst things that you can do is burden your gut with massive quantities of food. And it doesn't matter what the food is, whether it's healthy food or not. Remember that everything you put in your gut has to be processed. It has to be broken down. It has to be assimilated. That's work for your GI tract. And if your GI tract is already compromised over a leaky gut, if you already have an inflamed bowel over gluten, if you already have an issue in your gut that's not fully healed and not ready, then throwing too much food in it, in and of itself, the excess can be the problem. So keep that in mind as you are thinking about what you're going to eat and how you're going to eat over the holiday. Okay. Kayla, I have a question. Last night I had drinks with a friend. Today I feel very depressed. Does alcohol make people depressed? I stopped unless it's a special occasion. Is it normal to make people depressed? Yeah, what is alcohol? As a drug, it's a depressant. So it depresses you, and that depresses, we tend to think of depression as sad, but the depression can also be depressed neurological function. So depressed cognition, depressed energy, depressed psychology. So think of alcohol as being able to do all those things. One of the things alcohol affects is it affects your liver, and your liver affects your ability to convert your T4 to T3, which is your thyroid hormone, your active thyroid hormone. So if you suppress your thyroid hormone conversion, you can be depressed in that way as well. The other thing alcohol can do is it robs the body of B vitamins. It actually causes a depletion of B vitamins. Well, B12 and B6 and folate all play a role in neurotransmitter production in the brain. They're very, very important for neurological health. And all 3 of those vitamin deficiencies can cause depression. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, yeah, alcohol can definitely cause depression. And so it's, again, it's one of those things. It won't cause it in everybody. But for most people, remember, alcohol is a downer. It's a depressant. And so that's what its effect. It's what its long-term effect is. Okay. Erica is asking, what about taking activated charcoal? There's nothing wrong with taking activated charcoal for specific reasons, but you have to delineate for me, Erica, because I need to know what the premise of taking that charcoal is for you. Charcoal can be very, very effective at helping with certain aspects of detoxification. But again, give me more backdrop around that, and I can better help you with an answer. Let's see here. Oh, okay. I won't chime in there. Let's see here. Okay. So Brenda's asking about Hashimoto's hypothyroidism and what about leaky gut? Well, it's really common to see people with Hashimoto's also have a leaky gut, and for that leaky gut to be a contributing factor into that Hashimoto's condition. So one of the best things that you can do, Brenda, is just get with a good functional medicine doc about testing, the appropriate testing for gut function and the appropriate monitoring for Hashimoto's to see whether or not those two are actually connected for you. But yes, I'm trying to answer your question here in that yes, there is a correlation and a connection. You just need to have somebody who's in depth monitor and measure that for you so that you can figure out whether or not it's maybe so you figure out whether or not it's a part of your issue. Let's see. Joy is chiming in. I've used mashed cauliflower to make a pizza crust. Yeah, mashed cauliflower can make a good pizza crust. Again, go back to tapioca and arrowroot can as well. But if you have a hard time with carbohydrates in your diet, go with the mashed cauliflower option. Let's see here. So Lisa's asking, we talked about this already. Are sweet potatoes and yams okay? Yes, they are okay. What I was referring to in potatoes is white potato, your classic white flesh potato, like your russet potato or your tiny little red potatoes. Those are the kinds that we're referring to as part of the nightshade family. Another question coming in about nightshades. Can nightshades be reintroduced after an elimination period when working on autoimmunity? You can always try, but in my experience in helping people with autoimmunity, if you cut nightshades out to contribute to autoimmune resolution, generally you're not going to be able to add them back in. They're going to continue to be problematic for you. Again, that's just my experience. It doesn't mean you can't make that attempt, Liz. Okay. Okay. Looks like Sylvia posted up a link on on a Pinterest board, I guess with some recipe ideas. Maybe, I'm not quite sure, but she is asking me about einkorn. I don't recommend einkorn. There actually was a test done on einkorn and celiacs, and they were found to be reactive to it. So, there's that whole, if it's ancient grain, then it's healthy kind of thought process because the grain hasn't been hybridized, but they've actually tested einkorn directly against the guts of celiac patients and found it to be quite detrimental. So don't recommend it if you're struggling with a gluten sensitivity issue. All right. Erica, I do have a question. As you do get off of those avoids, I guess you're referring, Erica, to chapter 7 and 8. After your stomach settles down, will the weight begin to fall off? It can. I mean, there could be some other factors as well. I mean, weight loss is a complex issue. It's not just about calories in and calories out. A lot of times the weight gain is about excess. For a lot of people, it's about what I like to refer to as the gluten muscle wasting trap. It's where you have high levels of cortisol causing a muscle atrophy situation, which leads to muscle shortening, chronic pain around your joints, and a lack of mobility and a lack of exercise, all coupled, all perpetuated by inflammatory foods. So the more inflammatory foods a person is eating, the more it drives natural cortisol production to battle the inflammation. And again, that heightened cortisol is what leads to weight gain and water retention and muscle loss. So it can begin to fall off. A lot of times when we get the inflammatory foods out, the water weight and the retention will start to fall off, and we'll see water weight loss initially. But then there may be some additional weight loss that needs to happen as a result of muscle atrophy, years of muscle atrophy. So again, it's a complex issue, but yes, we can see weight loss fall off once we start getting those inflammatory foods out of the diet. Okay, is having undiagnosed celiac together with ulcerative colitis and lactose intolerance causing me to have an underlying adrenal, thyroid, or pituitary issue? I'm beginning to suspect I do. Hormones as well. Maria, that's that question is a little it's a little broad and complex to just say yes or no. Look, the best thing that you can do if you've got that much in terms of autoimmunity going on in your body, it's best to just get with a good qualified functional medicine practitioner and find somebody who can help guide you through that process. Because through the right testing, you could answer that question, but to just generically say yes or no, it would be irresponsible of me to just say yes or no without having additional data or information. So get with somebody who can get you that data and information. Let's see here. Andrea is asking, what is a good probiotic that I recommend? Two kinds. One is called Ultrabiotic Defense, and it is a very strong dose probiotic. And the other one is just take the ultra off the front of it, and it's just called Biotic Defense, and it's more of a maintenance dose probiotic. And both are very, very similar in terms of the species of bacteria that are in them. The species of bacteria are largely the same species of bacteria that are damaged as a result of gluten exposure. And so that's part of why they're formulated that way. But those are the two that I recommend people use consistently. Okay. What is my opinion on cholestyramine? I have some from a script, but know nothing about it. So again, it just depends on what you're using it for. Cholestyramine is a bile acid sequestrant, and it's designed to bind up bile in your GI tract. It was originally intended to be a cholesterol lowering medication, but now we're seeing doctors use cholestyramine in people who are going through a detox protocol, particularly to detox what are called mycotoxins, toxins from molds. So, it just depends. It depends on why you've been prescribed cholestyramine and what the intent is for. It's hard for me to venture an opinion without knowing that. Okay. Sandy Keaton Ramirez, is Otto's Naturals cassava flour okay to use? Look, I would say as long as you can call them and verify that it's not cross-contaminated, as long as you can call and verify them that preferentially that it's non-GMO, I would say you probably have a green light on it. Yvonne, quinoa is okay? No. There were a couple of studies done on quinoa a few years ago, And I'm going to post a link to that for you, because what it showed is that some of the quinoa has several different proteins within it, and many of the different proteins in quinoa look like gluten. So if you're gluten sensitive, quinoa can actually mimic a gluten reaction, and that's why I recommend, again, chapter 7 and 8, quinoa's out. So here is a link for you on that very topic. You can go check out and read more about the research on quinoa. Okay, getting ready to wrap it up. Let's see. I wanted to get to this one. Misty's asking that many people with scleroderma aren't easily convinced to stop eating grains, as they claim there are no noticeable symptoms from eating it, such as GI distress. How can I help educate them? Well, I mean, the best way, buy them all copies of No Grain, No Pain. No, a shameless plug on the book. But seriously, look, when we go back in time and we look at the history of autoimmune disease, Misty, the number one thing that stands out the most predominantly for autoimmune disease is that it is food induced, and gluten is the most well-studied food as it relates to the progenesis of autoimmune disease. So, that I would start from that fundamental premise of, look, you have two choices. The people with scleroderma have two choices. They can either continue eating grains, taking medications, and suffering, and not really solving the issue. And the medicines, as you and I both know, are immune suppressants that over time lead to a host and a battery of different kinds of problems, including an increased risk for cancer. Or they can change their diet, which seems to me rather a small ask in terms of what the outcome might be, even if they would just do a 30, 60-day trial to determine, or help to determine what, how they're feeling when they come off of it, or how they feel when they try to add it back in. Because a lot of times people won't notice GI symptoms, but it will be a pain symptom. It will be directly a pain-based symptom. So that's where that's the way I would approach it. I hope that's helpful. I know that not everybody's really willing or ready to change their diet, and so from that perspective, I don't know what to tell you. Let's see here. Andrew's asking, is gluten a genetic thing? I have it, but my parents and brothers don't. A distant cousin also has it. Would I have to worry that my children might inherit this too? Yeah, gluten sensitivity is a genetic sensitivity. It's a genetic, it's identified through genetic testing. And so, yes, it is very much a genetic thing. Now, there are certainly other factors involved. Some people develop gluten sensitivity after being exposed to antibiotics, or after being exposed to certain kinds of medications that can damage the gut. But it is very much, true gluten sensitivity is a genetic thing. And yes, it's a possibility that your children might inherit it too. Jenna, if you gained weight after going on a gluten-free diet, then I would say that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's highly likely that you used the gluten-free pastas and the gluten-free cereals, like the corn and the rice-based and the oatmeal-based products. Those are highly, highly glycemic and will rack on the weight, even for those who think they're following a gluten-free diet, and they're really just following a wheat, barley, and rye-free diet. So that would be the first thing I'd say. If you didn't really go grain-free, then you really weren't on a gluten-free diet, and that might be the reason why you gained a lot of weight. I see that very frequently in people. So check into that, and let's see if you can't get your improvement moving forward from there. Let's see. We'll take another question. Nancy, is there any dark chocolate that is okay? It depends on a lot of, with the dark chocolate, it depends on the other ingredients. So what that refers to is some chocolates have like a soy in them. So I would highly recommend, if you're look for like one that is not made with soy lecithin. Look for one that's made with like a sunflower lecithin. I want to say that Lily's brand, don't quote me on this because they may have changed their ingredients, but I think they are a brand of dark chocolate that used sunflower lecithin and used stevia as a sweetener, and it's also organic chocolate. So that would be something that could be consumed unless you have a problem with chocolate. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Okay. The questions just keep coming, so I got to wrap it up. It's time. So, look, I wish you all a fantastic Thanksgiving and holiday season, and I'll be back again next Monday for another Pig Dr. Osborne's Brain show. So we'll see you next week. Have a great Thanksgiving. Wish you all the best. Take care.